My name is Sarah Collins. I am 36 years old and I am a mother. Not a perfect one, I have never pretended to be. But I am present, I am attentive, I am there every single day in the ways that matter most. I pack the lunches. I sign the permission slips. I sit beside the bed when the nightmares come. I hold the hand that reaches for mine in the dark and I say without hesitation, I am here, you are safe. I need you to remember that about me, because what I am about to tell you will test your understanding of what betrayal really looks like. It doesn't always arrive with raised voices or slamming doors. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in a soft voice, in a whispered word planted in the ear of a child. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon someone can use against you is your own daughter's fear. 2 weeks ago, on a Tuesday afternoon in October, I drove to Maplewood Elementary School to pick up my daughter Emma, exactly as I had done hundreds of times before. I knew the route so well I could have driven it with my eyes closed. I knew the parking lot's rhythm, the rush of minivans, the sound of the final bell, the way the double doors burst open, and 100 children spilled out into the afternoon like an exhaled breath. I knew exactly what to look for: a bright yellow backpack, bouncing wildly with each step, and underneath it, my daughter's face, that enormous grin that seemed physically impossible for someone so small, the one that lit up every single time she spotted me waiting for her. Every single time. I parked the car. I walked toward the entrance with a coffee in one hand and her after-school snack in the other, peanut butter crackers, her favorite, the ones with the little smiley face pressed into each one. I was already smiling before the doors even opened. And then the doors opened. Emma was standing just inside the entrance. I saw her immediately, but she wasn't running. She wasn't smiling. She stood perfectly still, holding her teacher's hand so tightly her small knuckles had gone white, and she was looking at me, her own mother, standing 5 feet away, like I was a stranger she had been warned about. Her teacher, Ms. Reyes, stepped forward before I could even call Emma's name. She moved with deliberate gentleness, not aggressive, not accusatory, but unmistakably blocking. Her body language said everything before her mouth did. She leaned slightly forward and lowered her voice. "Mrs. Collins," she said carefully, "I need to speak with you for just a moment before Emma goes home." I remember the exact sensation that moved through my chest in that second. Not panic. Not yet. Something slower and colder, like the temperature in the room had dropped 10 degrees without anyone opening a window. "Of course," I said, my voice came out steady. I was proud of that. Ms. Reyes glanced briefly over her shoulder at Emma, then back at me. "Emma has expressed to us that she doesn't feel comfortable leaving school today unless another adult is present." I waited for her to laugh, to follow it with, "Kids say the funniest things, don't they?" She didn't laugh. "She's been telling us for the past few weeks," Ms. Reyes continued, measuring each word, "that she sometimes feels unsafe at home, that you forget things, that you get confused. She said someone spoke to her about it. Someone told her she needed to be careful." The coffee cup in my hand felt suddenly very heavy. "Unsafe, forget things, get confused," someone told her. I stood there in that hallway with its cheerful hand-painted bulletin boards and its smell of crayons and disinfectant, and I understood in a single crashing instant that the world I had walked into that afternoon was not the same world I had left that morning. After 30 minutes of careful conversation with Ms. Reyes, the school counselor, and eventually Emma herself, they allowed her to come home with me. Protocol had been followed. I had answered every question calmly. I had smiled at the right moments. I had reassured them thoroughly, and I had managed to hold the entire structure of myself together without letting a single crack show, which was, I think, the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. The walk to the car felt like moving through water. I helped Emma into her car seat. I buckled her in. I kissed the top of her head and she let me, which was something which meant something, though I couldn't quite decide what. I got into the driver's seat. I put the key in the ignition. For almost a full minute, I just sat there. Then I pulled out of the parking lot and drove. Emma was quiet in the back. Usually the ride home was filled with an unbroken monologue: who said what at lunch, what they drew in art class, whether her best friend Sophia had brought the cool markers or the boring ones. Emma had opinions about markers. She had opinions about everything. Her silence that afternoon was so complete and so wrong that it felt like a physical presence, like a third passenger S. Sitting between us. About halfway home, I asked the only question I could bear to ask. Emma, sweetheart, why didn't you want to come with me today? A pause, long enough that I glanced in the rearview mirror to see if she'd fallen asleep. She hadn't. She was looking out the window, her small face unreadable. I was just doing what I was told, she said finally. Quietly, like she wasn't sure she should even be admitting that much. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Who told you, baby? She shrugged, a 6-year-old's shrug, shoulders up, chin down, the universal gesture for I don't know or I don't want to say. I don't remember, she said. They just said it was important. They? I filed that word away. I kept driving. I did not press. I did not cry. I smiled at her in the mirror and told her I was glad we were going home together, and she gave me a small, uncertain smile back, and it broke my heart in a way I haven't quite recovered from even now. At home, we followed our normal routine. I made her favorite dinner. We watched 45 minutes of television, her choice, always her choice, a cartoon about a brave little girl who goes on adventures and fixes problems, which felt, that evening, unbearably ironic. I helped her with her homework. We had a snack. I ran her bath, I read to her. But through all of it, I watched her, and she watched me. It was subtle the way she did it. She was 6 years old, she didn't have the sophistication to fully conceal it, but I could see her observing me in small moments. When I reached for something across the table, she noticed. When I paused before answering her question, she noticed. She was cataloging my behavior, checking it against something she had been told to look for, and the awareness of that, the knowledge that my own child was quietly monitoring me, was almost unbearable. After she was asleep, I sat down at the kitchen table and I let myself feel it. All of it. The fear and the confusion and the grief and the dawning, horrible anger that I had been working very hard not to look at directly. Then I got up. I went to the hooks by the door where Emma's backpack hung. I unzipped the front pocket. Inside her notebook, her purple one, the one with the unicorn on the cover, I found a folded piece of paper that didn't belong there. It was not Emma's handwriting. Emma's handwriting was enormous and uneven and enthusiastic, letters tumbling over each other like puppies. This was an adult's handwriting. Neat, deliberate, controlled. Small, careful letters in blue ink. One sentence. Remember what we talked about. Stay careful. I stood in my kitchen holding that piece of paper for a very long time. The refrigerator hummed. The clock on the wall ticked. Outside, a car passed. Remember what we talked about. Stay careful. Someone had written a note to my 6-year-old daughter. Someone had folded it up and put it in her backpack and told her, in so many words, to be on guard, against me, in my own home. I set the note down on the table very carefully, as though it were made of glass. Then I took out my phone and photographed it. Then I put it in a Ziploc bag and put the Ziploc bag in the back of the highest cabinet, behind the holiday dishes. I was already thinking like someone who might need evidence. That thought frightened me almost as much as the note itself. I asked Emma about the note the next morning before school. I kept my voice light, curious, the way you ask a child about something interesting you found in their room. Oh, what's this? Where'd this come from? She looked at it. She looked at me. Something moved across her face, not guilt exactly, but the specific expression children wear when they are holding information that feels too big for them. A weight they were given by someone larger. I think someone gave it to me, she said. Do you remember who? She shook her head. Was it someone at school, or someone we know? She looked down at her cereal. I don't remember. She did remember. I was almost certain of it, but I also knew that pressing her harder would only teach her to close off more, so I let it go. I kissed her forehead. I put her on the bus. I went inside and sat down and tried to think clearly. Who had access to Emma outside of school? Who had been around her in the past several weeks without my knowledge? Who? And this was the question that my mind kept skipping away from, because the answer felt too large and too monstrous to look at directly. Who would want my daughter to be afraid of me? The answer, when I finally made myself sit still long enough to let it arrive, did not surprise me as much as it should have. That afternoon, I called Emma's school under the pretense of updating her emergency contact list, a perfectly ordinary administrative reason to call. During the conversation, I mentioned casually that I wanted to make sure I was the only person who had been picking Emma up. There was a pause. Actually, the school. Elle's secretary said, checking her records, she was signed out early 3 times last month, by a family member. My throat tightened. Oh, I must have forgotten. Who was it? She checked, she told me. Patricia, my mother-in-law, Emma's paternal grandmother. Patricia, who I had not spoken to in nearly 3 weeks. Patricia, who I had seen perhaps 4 times in the past year. Patricia, who, when she called to speak to Emma, always asked questions that didn't quite fit. Is your mom doing okay? Is she sleeping well? Does she ever seem confused about things? Questions I had always chalked up to the particular anxious nosiness of grandmothers. Patricia, who had written on the school sign-out sheet that she was picking Emma up early because I was under stress. I sat with that for a moment. She had told the school I was under stress. She had done this without my knowledge, without my permission, and without any factual basis. She had done it 3 times and I hadn't known. My daughter had spent 3 afternoons in the care of someone who was, I was increasingly certain, whispering things into her ear. Things about me. Things designed to plant a seed of fear in a 6-year-old who trusted the adults in her life completely, because that is what 6-year-olds do. That is what they should do. Trust is the gift we give our children so they can grow up feeling safe in the world, and someone had taken that gift and used it as a weapon. I hung up the phone, I sat very still, I breathed. Then I called Patricia. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was warm, it was always warm, that was one of the things I had always liked about her. Patricia had a way of sounding like she was genuinely delighted to hear from you, like your call was the best thing that had happened to her all day. I had found that quality charming for years. That afternoon, listening to it, I felt something cold move through me. Oh, Sarah, what a lovely surprise. How are you, sweetheart? I told her I was fine. I told her Emma was doing well. I mentioned, carefully, that I had heard she had picked Emma up from school a few times recently. Oh, just here and there, she said lightly. I wanted to give you a break. You've seemed so tired lately. You haven't seen me lately, Patricia. A beat of silence, brief but real. Emma told me, she said smoothly. She mentioned you seemed worn out. I let that pass. I appreciate the thought, I said, but in the future, I'd love if you'd check with me first before picking her up, just so I know where she is. Of course, I should have called. A pause. Is everything all right? You sound a little tense. Everything's fine, I said. I just like to know Emma's schedule. We said goodbye warmly, pleasantly, like 2 women who had no conflict between them whatsoever. I hung up and sat there for a long moment. Then I went and found Emma, who was drawing at the kitchen table. Have you been visiting Grandma Patricia lately? I asked. She didn't look up from her drawing immediately. When she did, her eyes had that slightly careful quality again. Sometimes, after school. Do you like visiting her? She's nice, a pause, a small voice. She says I should be brave. Brave about what? Emma put her crayon down. She looked at the table. When she answered, it was barely above a whisper, and the words landed in my chest like stones dropped into deep water. In case you forget me one day. I did not sleep that night. I lay in the dark and I thought about every conversation I had watched Emma have with her grandmother. I thought about every phone call I had half overheard. I thought about the small, innocuous questions Patricia had asked over the years, about my sleep, my stress levels, whether I had seen a doctor recently, whether I found motherhood overwhelming sometimes. I had answered all of those questions honestly, the way you do when someone asks with apparent concern. I had never thought to wonder whether the answers were being stored somewhere, filed away, built into something. The next morning, while Emma was at school, I went through her tablet. I want to be clear about what I was looking for and what I was not looking for. I was not snooping on my child's private life. Emma was 6, she didn't have a private life in the way a teenager might. I was looking for evidence of contact I hadn't known about, and I found it. There were voice messages. 6 of them recorded over the course of 5 weeks, all from Patricia. Short messages, each one no longer than a minute, each one in that warm, gentle, completely trustworthy voice. I sat on Emma's bed, and I listened to all 6 of them in a row. Sweetheart, it's Grandma, I love you so much. You know, sometimes grown-ups get sick in ways you can't always see. Not on the outside, but on the inside in their minds. If you ever notice Mommy acting strange or confused, the most loving thing you can do is tell your teacher. That's how you help her. That's how why. Oh, protect yourself. Baby girl, I was thinking about you today. You are such a brave little girl. Remember, if Mommy ever scares you, you call me right away. Grandma will come. Grandma will always come. Emma, honey, I know this is a lot for such a little girl, but you are so smart and so strong. If Mommy doesn't remember things, or if she does something that seems wrong, tell your teacher. Write it down. That's what brave children do. I stopped the recording after the third one. I couldn't listen to more. I sat there in my daughter's bedroom with its fairy lights strung above the window, and its shelves full of stuffed animals, and its drawings taped to the wall, and I tried to contain what I was feeling into something I could manage. Because this was what Patricia had done. She had taken a 6-year-old child's natural, absolute trust in her grandmother, and she had turned it into a campaign. She had not lied outright, she was too careful for that. She had simply painted a picture. A slow, patient, accumulating picture delivered over 5 weeks in soft tones and loving words of a mother who was losing her mind. She had told my daughter to watch me, to document me, to report me, to fear me. And she had done it in the most untouchable way possible, because every single message, taken alone, could be explained away as concern, as grandmotherly worry, as a woman who loved her granddaughter and wanted to prepare her for difficulties that might arise. It was only when you heard all 6 together, in sequence, that the architecture of it became visible. And it was terrifying because it was so deliberate. A memory surfaced, something I had filed away without fully registering at the time. About 2 months earlier, Patricia and I had been on the phone discussing Emma's upcoming birthday party. At some point, without any particular transition, she had asked me a strange question. She had asked whether I knew, legally, how custody arrangements worked when a parent experienced a mental health crisis. I remembered being briefly puzzled by the question. I had said something like, "I'm not sure, that's an odd question," and she had laughed and said something about having seen a documentary about it. Wasn't it interesting? She just wondered what the rules were. And I had said I supposed it was interesting and we had moved on. I had thought nothing of it at the time. Sitting in Emma's bedroom now, I thought about nothing else. She had been asking about custody law. She had been doing it casually, buried inside a normal conversation, 2 months before my daughter began showing up at school expressing fear of going home with me. She had been planning this. Not in a fit of emotion, not as an impulsive act, she had been planning it with patience and deliberation, and the plan was exactly what I was now afraid it was. She wanted Emma, not for a weekend, not for a holiday. She wanted custody. She believed that if she could paint a convincing enough picture of me as unstable, through my daughter's testimony, through school records, through the carefully maintained concern of a loving grandmother, she could position herself as the safer option, as the adult who had always been paying attention while the mother unraveled. She had been building a case, and Emma had been her most important witness, because there is nothing in the world more devastating to a mother than her own child expressing fear of her. I made a decision that night. I would not confront her, not yet. Confronting her now, before I had everything I needed, would accomplish nothing. She would deny it. She would become sympathetic. She would turn the confrontation itself into more evidence of my volatility. Instead, I would prepare. Over the following week, I moved methodically. I wrote down everything: dates, times, incidents, the school sign-out records, Emma's exact words, the contents of each voice message. I transcribed the recordings from the tablet and backed them up in 3 separate places. I documented Patricia's pickup history with the school. I gathered my own records, my work history, my health records, Emma's pediatrician reports, school communications. Everything that painted the real picture. The picture of a woman who was, by every objective measure, a capable, healthy, loving mother. I also spoke quietly with the school counselor, explaining only that Emma seemed to be experiencing some externally introduced anxiety about her home environment, and asking her to observe without intervening. She agreed. She was kind and discreet, and I am still grateful for her. And I acted completely, utterly normal with Patricia. I returned her calls. I was warm. I invited her perspective. I asked her advice on a recipe once, which I will never make in a million years but which made her light up with pleasure and talk for 20 minutes about her herb garden. I gave her no indication that anything had changed. And she, growing comfortable, growing perhaps overconfident, grew more forthcoming. On a Thursday evening, she called and mentioned that she thought Emma should probably start having more scheduled time at her house. For stability, she said, for Emma's sake. I agreed that consistency was important for children. I kept my voice neutral and even interested. I hung up feeling like I was made of ice. 3 days later, she invited me to dinner. The restaurant was a quiet Italian place she liked. We ordered. We talked about ordinary things. She asked about my work. I told her things were going well. She nodded with an expression that suggested she was humoring something she didn't entirely believe. Then she sighed. She placed her hand over mine on the table. You know, she said gently, parenting alone is such hard work. I truly admire what you do. But sometimes children need more stability than one person can provide. No shame in that, it's just a fact. Emma seems pretty stable to me, I said pleasantly. She seems anxious, Patricia said, and there was something different in her voice now. Firmer, more prepared. She seems frightened sometimes. She's told me things, Sarah. What kinds of things? She shook her head as though reluctant to cause pain. She worries about you. She said you forget conversations, that sometimes you seem confused. I've been very concerned. A pause. I think it might be time to have a serious conversation about what's best for her, whether maybe she should stay with me for a while, just until things settle. There it was. The whole thing, laid out on the table between us like a hand of cards she believed she had already won. She had spent 5 weeks convincing my daughter I was losing my mind. She had recorded messages designed to turn Emma into an unreliable narrator of my daily life. She had visited the school and documented herself as a concerned, capable alternative caregiver. She had been patient and careful and thorough. And now she was sitting across from me in a nice restaurant and asking me softly to give her my child. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I picked up my phone from beside my plate. I opened the audio app. I pressed play. Sweetheart, it's Grandma. I love you so much. You know, sometimes grown-ups get sick in ways you can't always see. The color left her face so quickly, it was almost remarkable to watch. The message played through the quiet restaurant, Patricia's own voice filling the space between us, warm and gentle and completely, unmistakably calculated. Every word of it, every pause, every carefully placed suggestion delivered to a child who couldn't have known she was being used. I let it play until the end, then I turned it off. I have all 6 of them, I said quietly. I have the school pickup records. I have the note you had someone put in her backpack. I have the conversation you had with me 2 months ago about custody law. I looked at her steadily. I have everything. Patricia's mouth opened. Nothing came out. You weren't worried about Emma, I said. You were building a case. You used my daughter's trust and her love for you to make her afraid of me because you thought if you frightened her enough and documented enough of her fear, you could take her away from me. I paused. I want to know why. I deserve to know that much. The warmth had left her face entirely. What was underneath it was something harder, something I recognized in retrospect as what had always been there, hidden behind the smiles and the herb garden and the recipes I would never make. You don't deserve her, she said, quietly, almost reflectively, as though she was just giving voice to something she had been thinking for a long time. You've kept her from her father's family. You moved on too quickly. You work too much. She deserves more than you can give her. I sat with that for a moment. That's not your decision to make, I said. She is my daughter, she was given to me, and nothing you could have built, no story, no fear, no court case would have taken her from me because it was all based on a lie. I stood up. I hope, for Emma's sake, you find a way to be honest with yourself about what you did here, because she loved you. She trusted you completely, and you used that. I paid for my dinner, I thanked the server, I walked to my car. I sat in the dark parking lot for 5 minutes, and I let myself shake. The next morning, I sat down with a family lawyer and laid out everything I had. She went through it carefully, methodically, with the focused attention of someone who has seen a great many things and is not easily surprised. When she finished, she looked at me over her reading glasses. "This is well documented," she said. "And these recordings are significant. The deliberate targeting of a minor, the false statements to school staff, the attempts to manufacture fear in a child to support a custody claim, this is serious. We filed a formal complaint with the school district. We sent a formal leg. Al notice to Patricia. The school placed an immediate hold on any unofficial pickups and restricted access to Emma's records to authorized parties only. The school counselor had already noted in writing that Emma's anxiety appeared externally induced rather than rooted in anything observable at home. Legally, officially, everything closed around Patricia like a door swinging shut on an empty room. She did not respond to the legal notice. She did not try to contact Emma. She did not call me. I think, perhaps, she understood that every move she made now would only build the record further against her. The harder work, and the more important work, was with Emma. You cannot explain adult machinations to a 6-year-old in adult terms. You cannot sit down with a child and say, "Someone you loved manipulated you, deliberately, over weeks, in order to achieve a legal outcome." That language means nothing to her. What means something to her is simpler and more essential. We worked with a child therapist, a warm, unhurried woman named Dr. Ackefer, who had an office full of puppets, and a very gentle way of asking questions that made Emma feel like the most important expert in the room. Over several sessions, gently and without pressure, the truth was made safe enough for Emma to hold. One evening, about 3 weeks into therapy, Emma came and sat beside me on the couch while I was reading. She put her head against my arm. We sat like that for a little while. Then she said quietly, "Mom, I thought you were getting sick." "I know," I said. "I understand why." "I was scared you'd forget me." Her voice was very small. I set my book down. I put my arm around her. "I am never going to forget you," I said. "You are the most unforgettable person I have ever met in my entire life. You are the first thing I think about when I wake up every single morning." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I should have just asked you." "Yes," I said. "You can always ask me. Whatever anyone tells you about me, you can ask me directly. I will always tell you the truth." She nodded. She seemed to be working something out. "Grandma was wrong to say those things," she said. Not a question, a conclusion she had arrived at herself. "Yes," I said simply, "she was." "I think she was scared too," Emma said. I looked down at her. This 6-year-old girl, who had absorbed weeks of manipulation and had come out the other side, somehow, with more grace than most adults manage. "Maybe she was," I said. "That doesn't make it okay, but maybe you're right." Emma seemed satisfied with that. She picked up her own book, a picture book about a girl who builds a boat and sails around the world, and we read together in the quiet evening light, and something that had been missing from our house for weeks quietly came back in. Months have passed now. I want to tell you what our life looks like because I think it matters. Emma is back to herself. She runs. She talks constantly about markers and lunch and what her friend Sophia said and whether cats or dogs are objectively better dogs, she has concluded, but only medium-sized ones, and what she wants to be when she grows up, currently a marine biologist who is also a detective. She asks me questions freely, including hard ones, and when something worries her she says so, and we talk about it. And she seems to understand now that honesty between us is not something to be afraid of, but something to run toward. The fear is gone. The watchfulness is gone. She no longer catalogs my behavior or waits for me to fail some invisible test. She simply lives with me, the way children are supposed to live with the people who love them, freely and trustfully, and with her whole heart. I think about Patricia sometimes, not with anger anymore, or not only with anger, with something more complicated. She is Emma's grandmother. She loved Emma in her own way, I believe that. She simply loved her in a way that was really about herself, about her grief over her son, about her sense of what Emma was owed, about her conviction that she knew better. She mistook her own desires for concern, and she made choices that I cannot forgive but that I think I understand. Emma does not see her. That may change someday. It will be Emma's choice when she is old enough to make it with full understanding. What I want to leave you with is this. I was a mother who nearly lost her daughter's trust, not because of anything I did, but because someone who knew how to exploit a child's love decided to use it as a tool. And for a while, it worked. For a while, I stood in a school hallway and watched my own daughter look at me like I was someone to be afraid of. And that image, that specific, particular image, will live in me for the rest of my life. But here is what else will live in me. The morning, 3 weeks after everything came out, when Emma came flying out of those school doors with her yellow backpack bouncing, and that enormous impossible grin on her face, and she ran to me full speed and crashed into my arms, and I caught her, the way I have always caught her, the way I will always catch her, and she said into my neck, "I knew you'd be here, Mom, I knew it." And I said, "Of course I'm here, where else would I be?" And we stood there in the parking lot not moving, not needing to move, just present to each other in that uncomplicated, irreducible way. No one can manufacture that. No one can document it away or whisper it out of existence or slowly, carefully, patiently dismantle it over 5 weeks of soft-voiced recordings. It exists in a place that is deeper than fear, deeper than doubt, deeper than any story someone could build around it. Love, real love, cannot be rewritten by lies. I want you to remember that. Because the world is full of quiet architects, people who build their cases slowly, who work in whispers, who use the closest, most trusting relationships you have as their raw material. And if you ever find yourself standing in a hallway unable to breathe because your own child is looking at you like a stranger, I want you to know this. Pay attention, stay calm, document everything, trust yourself. And run toward the truth, even when it terrifies you. Because the truth is the only thing they can never take away.